Hey guys, it's Wyvern here with a video to discuss the Festag update that dropped today. Um, it's not a huge set of changes, but there obviously the beta dropped in December, and that's now been changed and updated. And there's been some mostly for balancing change, mostly some interesting balancing decisions, I suppose, for multiplayer more so than for campaign. In campaign, though, there are a few little tidbits as well. Obviously, this patch or this beta is implementing all sorts of new skill trees for Warhammer 1 lords, trying to bring them up to snuff with Warhammer 2 lord skill trees for armies, which you can all check out in the original Festag update patch. But here, we're just here to discuss the differences from the original Festag update to the updated update and see what it's all about. So right off the bat, most of this is just quality of life changes and instructions on how to install. In case you don't know, you can read that and figure that out. But really, the skill changes. There's only been one major change made from the original beta. Most of this is quality of life. Well, a small increases, small improvements to Grumbrindle. He's now regained Flash Bomb, as was the Mighty Beard of Defense. Both very nifty skills on Grumbrindle. Grumbrindle's already kind of the go-to OP Dwarf Lord to start with, so not exactly the most critical thing ever, but still, it's very nice to see those skills back. I was a little disappointed when I fired up the beta and saw that he no longer has the Mighty Beard of Defense, and which is a really pretty nifty skill if you're fighting on the defensive in campaign. Main changes here: Isabelle von Karstein has regained her old monster buffing skills, which is awesome in my opinion. And not only has she regained them, they've actually been improved, I think, to be more of sort of viable or reasonable. For example, the Vargeist upgrade used to just be plus 35 armor. Now it's plus 25 armor, but also plus 12 melee attack, which is a huge improvement. And plus 12 melee attack on Terrorgeists, Vargals, it's all great. The Direwolves and Fellbats, I think the Fellbats used to have some really awkward improvement. It was like plus 12 melee defense, and then like plus 3 AP damage, which, given that they can't hit anything anyway, is kind of pointless. But now getting more melee attack is going to make them a lot more viable, I think, for knocking out sort of squishy targets, or potentially dealing with spearmen and units like that. So I already did enjoy using them, even in campaign with sort of min-maxed or maxed out builds. I'd like using the Fellbats. So I think it's cool to see these skills returned and probably much improved. Otherwise, some quality of life changes, basically. Most of these skills, it's skills now correctly affecting units, now correctly synergizing, or that sort of stuff. Throg here, his buffs affecting all troll units. I didn't even realize they weren't affecting all troll units, so now we learned something new there, or I learned something new there. But not much to say there. Some building changes as well. Once again, mostly I would say quality of life stuff. One, I guess, major or somewhat major change is that the Dread Knight Palace building now increases Lord Recruit rank by 1 in all provinces, which means it can stack across provinces, which is pretty nuts. There's also been additions of Lord Recruit ranks to multiple other special buildings, so that's kind of cool. Not the most important thing ever, but like I said, some quality of life improvements, and by and large, I would say these are good changes because it's just positive improvements with no real negatives associated with them. So that's all pretty cool. But what I really wanted to discuss here was the multiplayer stuff. Obviously, the rest of the changes are still taking place. I'm not going to list through them. This is the old beta over here on the right, the new beta over here on the left. So going through things. Well, obviously the Green Knight, the changes for Bretonnia are staying much the same, except Grail Guardians, about which there was a whole thread on the forums, are going to be dropping in cost. Personally, I think Grail Guardians are okay unit. They don't really have a place, or very much of a place, in the current Bretonnia meta. I do know I use them sometimes myself, but I think that they might be a little bit overpriced for the performance. Definitely given the fact that they're simply a brick that you use as a shield for the Fey Enchantress. There were some other suggestions made, like giving them the Guardian trait or giving them better melee stats in exchange for some of their defensive stats, both of which I could get behind, but as a simple fix, I think minus 50 cost might be okay. The rest of the changes here, same as before. Nothing too crazy, but I do think it's a quality of life improvement to Bretonnia, for sure. As a whole. The Dark Elves, Charybdis becoming aquatic, well, that's who cares, basically. There's only a few maps with water where that's relevant. Nice buff, I guess, but not too important. The Raven Heralds, though, now are dropping in cost by 100, which is pretty good. The unit, I don't play much Dark Elves, so it's not necessarily something I noticed, but there's a lot of good players were complaining that the unit is overpriced, and I'll take their word for it. I don't know. I have seen the unit fairly often, but it's definitely a pretty expensive unit for how much damage it does, or how much damage potential it has, especially if you compare it to something like the grossly underpriced deck dropper handguns. So definitely pretty good buff there. Otherwise, the Dwarf changes the same, swap on Master Rune of Slowness, which is literally like a net nerf to the Master Engineer, who's already a bad hero, but at least it might make the Thane a little more viable. The Empire, Mortar Drop, and cost, Flagellants got improved. Net buffs. The Flagellant's still in a bit of an odd spot. I do think the Mortar buff is nice, but I was one of the few people who really thought the Mortar was already in a good spot, so the fact that it's getting buffed is, in my opinion, a bit ridiculous, but what can I say? Otherwise, we do have, obviously, the changes to the Crimson Killers. It does look like Azag will not be getting the Spider Banner in multiplayer, which is interesting. I'm not entirely sure what the logic behind that is. I'm not sure. I haven't checked the actual in-game yet. Maybe it's simply omitted, or maybe they simply forgot to put it in here. I kind of hope they do, because I kind of wish Azag would keep that. It's nice to have like an item, especially on a Legendary Lord. But, yeah, it looks like they got removed. Well, Alistair's not actually in Quick Match, but he now has Siege Attacker. Bastiladon's had its accuracy improved. I'm not sure by how much. Perhaps that's something that has to be checked in Total War stats once they put up stats for the beta. Norskins, same changes as before. All in all, good improvements. The bug fix on the Marauder Ice Wolf Chariot, so they now run at the supposed 95 speed. Marauder Champions got more health, and the Great Weapons also got more run speed, which is nice. They were previously at like 33 instead of the 35, like the normal Marauder Champions, which is odd. Skaven got some buffs, and this is pretty cool. Skaven have been in a bit of a garbage spot. In my opinion, they are the weakest faction in the entire game right now, which breaks my heart because they are one of my favorite factions, lore-wise. The Plague Monks and Sir Bears are still getting their +1 melee attack buff, which I think is basically worthless. But now Halberds are getting +2 melee defense, which is nice. They're a trash Halberd unit. They probably still are going to be a trash Halberd unit, but at least now they're going to be a bit more passable. Queek dropping in cost is also nice. It should make them a bit more viable, which I think is really nifty. Tomb Kings as well have had some changes. Casket of Souls dropping in cost by 50. Obviously, the Tomb Scorpions changes are still going through. Knock, Interrupt, Chance, or Ignore Chances, and mass drops, all that sort of stuff is still going through. That said, it's now swapping out 5 melee attack for 5 bonus versus infantry, which is a pretty significant nerf. It's going to be much less effective against large targets than it was before. Before it was kind of a decent unit against everything, and now it's getting more and more specialized against infantry, which is quite a nerf. Casket of Souls dropping in cost, definitely a good quality of life change. The unit is probably a bit overpriced. It's not a unit I use very often myself. It's not a unit I see used very often. So probably a good choice there. Especially for such an artillery. Like, Tomb Kings play like a pretty artillery heavy faction, so that's good, I think. Now, Vampire Coast. Well, more nerfs and more changes than before. So if we quickly go through, we can see the deck droppers are still losing speed, which is really nice. They are still losing some of their damage output, the handgun variant, which is good. The unit is ridiculous. I think it is still going to be ridiculous, to be quite honest with you guys. But a nerf is better than no nerf. The deck dropper bomber is getting a buff. I actually don't think it's enough. The unit's probably still going to be trash. But hey, at least it's something. Zombie Pirate deckhands in all variants are losing 2 health per entity by the look of it, which is good. The units are grossly overperforming right now. They have way too much health. They've got like 800 or something. It's absolutely over the top. So with 120 models, this is going to be a drop of 240 health. I'm not even sure if it's enough, but I think it is a good start to nerfing these units. Zombie gunnery mobs and zombie handgun mobs also all losing 2 health per entity, which is good. Putting these before, these units were just almost impossible to break, almost impossible to crumble effectively, and just way too tanky for how dirt cheap and garbagey they were supposed to be. So this loss of HP for across the board form, I think, is a very good change and a very solid rework. Zombie gunnery mob bombers, so the guys who throw bombs. Now, granted, they've lost HP, which sucks. But they're not a very good unit to begin with. But they have had improvements to their melee attack, their offensive stats. They now have a bigger model count than before. I think 120 models like all the normal zombie units. They've also, yeah, otherwise, I guess that's it basically. They've gained ammo, which is nice. So now they can do a bit more damage with their explosives. Still not sure they're an amazing or even decent unit for the price, but at least they are getting into a better spot. Now, hand cannons. These guys were complete garbage before. Now they are arguably perhaps overperforming. Supposedly, if you put them in guard mode, they beat, I think, Chosen. Maybe it was Chosen with great weapons, but they beat Chosen as like a straight up fight, which is ridiculous for a unit that costs like 550 gold. With no need to maneuver, no need to do anything. You just sit there and take it in the face, and you can win, apparently. So they are losing. Before they were gained plus 8 AP damage. Now they're only gaining plus 7, and they are dropping in health per entity, which I think is a good improvement overall. Still, I think the unit might be overperforming. Animated Hulk's still getting a buff. Less of a buff than before. More melee defense, more leadership, more 15 more armor, which is not as much as before. It was 25 armor. I don't think that's needed. Animated Hulks are in a good spot. I've used them quite a bit now because I've been trying to do alternate builds, both for the channel and just to try stuff out for myself for fun. And the unit really doesn't need more melee stats. It's okay. It's a 750 gold monster that does its job. I'm pretty sure that in testing against like Chevron up greatswords, a unit of Animated Hulks trashes the greatswords when it's stacked on top of a unit of deckhands. So the unit's in a good spot already. I really don't think the buffs are needed. I don't think they're deserved. So I don't know what CA's thinking here, especially because it's a pretty huge amount of buffs. Plus 15 armor. I think it like doubles their armor values. I think their base armor right now is like 15. Plus 4 melee defense. Like seriously, the unit doesn't need it. But I'm getting salty here, but that is something I think is ridiculous. Deck Guard, the Depth Guard, and the Depth Guard Regiment of Renown, or Depth Guard Halberds and Depth Guard Regiment of Renown, are gaining melee defense, which is probably good. The unit is pretty crap, so they need it in my opinion. Gallows Giant is getting fixed. We already knew this. Necrofex Gloss is going up in cost, which is a change from before. Definitely a good one. Necrofex Gloss is probably a bit overperforming. I do think a lot of its overperformance, though, is bound to the free summon and the hordes of summons the Vampire Coast can put on the field. So I'm not entirely sure it's necessary. I think maybe some other stuff should have been tweaked first. Shade Wraith Gunner is going down in cost, which is good. The unit doesn't see much use. Otherwise, basically, the Terrorgeist rework, increasing its size, is now hitting, and all the removal of Hornswaggles from Vampire Fleet Admirals, Closter Deerfin gains Siege Attacker, loss of Hornswaggle on Aranessa, which I think is weird. I feel like she's like the one hero that who should get it. At least she's going down in cost. So is Luther. Noctilus is actually going up in cost. So I think, by and large, I think it's the second round of updates on the Festag is much better, or more on point with what the Vampire Coast needed to rework than before. Still not sure it's quite there yet, but it is a big improvement over what the previous nerfs were. Then on to Vampire counts. Basically the same nerfs to Terrorgeist. That's the big thing. It's going to make Terrorgeist a little less, or probably a lot less capable of escaping. There's obviously been nerfs to stats for for the Blood Dragon. He's gone up in cost as well. Red Duke has gained Frenzy and gone up in cost, which I'm not sure it's great, but hey, at least it's something. Vampires, the Vampire Heroes are gaining some armor, which is nice. Lamian Lord gains some armor on a Hellsteed, which is nifty. I actually do like using the Lamian Lord. I think he's pretty good, so that's cool to see. The Von Karstein Vampire Lord gains Siege Attacker, so not much there. Basically just armor improvements across the board. The Wood Elves, improvements to Treeman's hit ignore chance. Orion gaining 10 melee defense. Wildwood Rangers gaining 4 leadership. Like I said before, I think this is pointless. It's not really a fix that needed to happen. Wildwood Rangers have other issues, and leadership is not one of them. I think that Vanguard deployment, better movement speed, stock, any of those things would improve them far more than 4 leadership is going to do. The unit is almost already really tough to break. They've got immune psychology and some really respectable leadership, so I don't know. I don't think it's necessary. I think they need to buff somewhere else. But the buffs to Ryan and Treeman obviously good. Abilities, I'm not really sure there's been much, if anything's to say here. Flash Bomb has been, actually I guess there is, I think I've missed some of these. So Rune of Slowness, now just simply gives minus 18% move speed. Instead of there being a master of slowness, which is what happened before. Red Rune was, of course, reworked. Axe of Dargo has been reworked. Flash Bomb, though, removed recharge in melee, but dropped in duration, which I think is a passable trait. The Rune Helm of Zufbar now doesn't give as much leadership, but it removed the deactivation condition, which I don't even know, to be honest. I've never bring the Rune Helm of Zufbar with Grumbrindle. I think it's useless, so I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what it does, guys. I'm sorry, but maybe Zoo Devil or whoever actually plays Dwarves a bunch can fill in there. I don't if this is like a good improvement or not, or if they get use out of it. But I've never really used the Runel. Greenskins. It does look like the spider banner removal was not a mistake, or not a typo, because it's not here. I'm not a fan of its removal, but at least get on with it. It's still being improved, and Get Snake has been significantly improved as well. Ross Moondial now only has 150 meter target range, which is great. It means it's going to be much tougher to shut down shooting. It means it means that Noctilus is actually going to have to wander into range of shooting to drop that ability, which is a pretty significant nerf, or pretty significant penalty. For the Wood Elves, Horn of the Wild Hunt's been buffed, which we already knew before. Finally, for spells, basically the same stuff as before. Drown Dead going up in power cost, which I think is not quite enough. Just one increase in power cost is not quite cutting it, I think. The plus 4-second recharge time on Denizens of the Deep is a ludicrously short, in my opinion. That's still not where it needs to be. Invocation of Nehek also being nerfed, but not quite enough, in my opinion. But now Vindictive Glare has also been nerfed, and once again, I would say it is not nerfed enough, because the spell currently costs 4 Winds of Magic and 8 Overcast, so that's going to be like 5 and 9, if I'm figuring this correctly. I don't think that's really... I still don't think it's very balanced. It's still a ridiculous spell. So at least it's something of a nerf, but I think it really needed a nerf to just the raw damage output, or at least nerfed what the Overcast does. But regardless, by and large, I would say these buffs, or these buffs or changes, nerfs, whatever, depending on what faction we're talking about, are good. I think they're on the right track. There are a few oddballs here. The animated Hulk changes, I don't get at all. I don't know why they're getting buffed. I feel like nobody tested this or really thought this through. The problem is the Vampire Coast meta simply doesn't really allow for the unit, more so than the unit's actually weak. I think removing the Spider Banner from Azag is unnecessary. I think they should have kept that in there. I think that's pretty cool. Otherwise, though, by and large, I think these changes are definitely solid, and I think they're on the right track. If you guys have your own thoughts and opinions, comments, critiques, disagreements, be sure to put them down in the comment section. I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you guys think this small change here, the Festag update, is good, be sure to let me know. If you think it's not good, if you think there's other stuff that I didn't cover that is worth mentioning, be sure to post it down in the comments. I'd love to hear you guys' opinions on the matter. So I guess that is it. I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.